Hello again, I'm back. It's Greg from Supposedly Fun. You may remember yesterday I did a list of some books that I am prioritizing to read for Pride Month, queer books, queer authors. I had to separate my TBR for this genre into two different videos because my TBR is really long. So I'm going to do the second part of that series. These are some books that I'm planning to read in the more long term. I will link the first video down below, but in the meantime, let's get going on the rest. The first is from Edmund White. You may remember him from yesterday's video because I talked about how I want to prioritize City Boy, which is his memoir about living in New York City in the 60s and 70s. That book got the priority because, given the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riot this year, it felt like the more timely book for me to read. However, that does not mean that I am any less interested in reading his novel, A Boy's Own Story, which is the first part in a trilogy of books. They're autobiographical and follow an unnamed narrator as he grows up and experiences life. In the first volume, he is a child in the 1950s, struggling with his identity in a heteronormative world. Definitely want to get to this at some point. Now, Larry Kramer is most remembered as he's still alive, but I'm calling him remembered as if he's gone. But anyway, he is most remembered as an activist who wrote the play The Normal Heart. But he also wrote a novel in 1978. Now, fun story for you really quickly. If you've ever noticed that I have this little Spider-Man Pez dispenser, it's because I'm kind of blocking the title of this book intentionally, just because I don't want to offend anybody, and it seems a little aggressive to have this jumping out at people from the spine of the book. So anyway, in 1978, he published a novel in which he satirizes the gay ghetto and the forced superficiality of gay relationships at the time by telling the story of a man looking for love and finding only lust at every turn. I've seen this book criticized both for the scathing nature of the satire and for a perceived bitterness, but if we're talking about classic gay literature, it can't be ignored. So I would like to get to that. Now, after I read Michael Thomas Ford's book, Full Circle, which I have talked about on this channel before, internet algorithms kept putting Jim Brogan's A Time to Live in front of me, even though it's out of print. I ordered a copy, and it has a naughty little cover. It is described as the first gay novel to deal with the problem of aging within the gay community, and if you've read the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel Less, you know that that remains a somewhat fraught topic today, and because of the time it was published, it also deals with a San Francisco that is haunted by the AIDS epidemic. Now, City of Night by John Ricci is considered another gay classic. Published in 1963, it gave voice to the burgeoning gay subculture and scandalized reviewers with its portrait of a hustler among drag queens and other underworld denizens. I would love to get to this. It is a proper chunky book, so it feels like it's going, just for that alone, it feels like it's going to need a little bit of dedication of time. Although, it turns out, I'm just learning this now, the back is actually like an annotated manuscript that is not the book. So, interesting. I did not know that. This is the 50th anniversary edition, so I guess that makes sense. Alright, it's still almost 500 pages, so there you go. Now, even older than City of Night is Andre Gide's classic The Counterfeiters, which is a philosophical novel from 1925 about morality, which features a number of gay and bisexual characters. Love to get to that someday. The philosophical aspect of it kind of makes me nervous, so if you've read this, please let me know if it's something I should not be intimidated by. Anyway, I mentioned in my previous video that the YA market has been a great home for LGBTQI representation, and one of the best-selling examples of that is Becky Albertalli's gay rom-com Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, which was, of course, adapted into the successful movie Love, Simon. I bailed on a book that Albertalli co-wrote because I thought it was excessively cutesy. That was actually the very first video I uploaded to YouTube. So hopefully this one will be better because I would like to read it. So time will tell. We also have Paul Monette's memoir Becoming a Man, Half a Life Story. It's essentially a non-fiction version of A Boy's Own Story by Edmund White, which again was an autobiographical novel in the first place. But Becoming a Man sounds wonderful. It follows Monette's struggle to imitate a straight man in his early life, how he was initially haunted by his homosexuality, and how that very same sexuality ultimately saved him when he finally came to terms with it. I have heard very good things about his writing, and the internet algorithms really want me to read his books as well. Laura Hobson is an author who I don't think a lot of people know anymore, although she was a wild bestseller in the mid-1900s. So she's most famous for writing the book Gentleman's Agreement, which is a novel about how pervasive anti-Semitism is in American society, even though you don't necessarily see it all the time. It's about a journalist who goes pretends to be Jewish in order to see the just rampant prejudice that Jewish people experience in this country. It was adapted into an Oscar-winning film starring Gregory Peck. So her novel Consenting Adult is another of those kind of socially conscious novels that she wrote. It follows a mother who must come to terms with her son's homosexuality and find ways to protect him from the prejudices of the era. I was not a fan of the book Gentleman's Agreement. I found it very clinical and impersonal. So hopefully Consenting Adult will be a different experience, hopefully a little bit more humane and relatable, because it sounds very interesting, and it sounds like it was published at it's a different point of view, if nothing else. It's focusing more on the mother than the person struggling to come out themselves. So in contrast to that, we have Robert Laloux's The Memoirs of a Beautiful Boy, which is described as a wickedly funny look at Laloux's gay coming of age in East Texas with his eccentric and flamboyant mother. The back of the book also describes, so after his father leaves them, his mother begins a desperate regimen of makeovers, extreme plastic surgeries, and finally hairpiece epoxies, all calculated to secure a new, wealthy husband. So, sounds like, if nothing else, it'll be fun. Now, as you can see, I think stories with queer representation are very important. But I especially think that's true for queer stories that are still largely hidden. That's one reason I really want to broaden my knowledge gap on transgender, the transgender community. Elin Harris's book, Invisible Life, is something else that would really help me. It is the first in a trilogy of books following the life of Raymond Tyler, who has a hard enough time growing up as a black man in America, but then also must face a sexuality that makes him a minority within a minority. I think this would be a very interesting book to read at some point. Now, in 2019's Willa and Hesper, Amy Feltman tells the story of two girls who fall in love and then separate when their familiarity gets too uncomfortable for one of them. Now on separate adventures, they must come to terms with their past, including their romantic past, in order to possibly find their way back to each other. It has a gorgeous cover. I have not really seen much online about this, so I don't have a whole lot of feedback about it. It's just something that sounded interesting to me, so I grabbed a copy of it, and I would love to get to it. In Garth Greenewell's What Belongs to You, an American teacher in Bulgaria unexpectedly finds himself in a sexual relationship with a local man named Mitko. As they are drawn to each other again and again, Greenewell explores the line between loneliness and risk, hunger and predation, playing off of the similarities between where the American teacher comes from, the American South, and the similarities and the stark differences between that and Bulgaria. So, it's also a slim little volume. Madeline Miller's recent bestseller, The Song of Achilles, tells the mythological story of Achilles and Patroclus. I can't say mythological names, I'm sorry. Anyway, they fall in love after Patroclus is exiled to the court of Achilles' father, only to see the Trojan War threaten to tear everything that they hold dear apart. I have heard many, 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 many wonderful things about this book, especially since Madeline Miller recently published Circe. It's something that still pops up again and again in my feed. Now, the film adaptation of Manuel Puig's Kiss of the Spider Woman has a very problematic depiction of one of its protagonists, that is Melina, a flamboyantly gay window dresser who fills his hours as a political prisoner in Argentina by telling stories filled with all the fantasy and romance of movies. Hopefully, the novel approaches this character with a lot more tact, because I found the movie borderline offensive most of the time and over the line offensive a lot of the other. So hopefully the book will do that character justice. And lastly, for now at least, we have Kevin Sessoms' memoir of growing up gay in the South, Mississippi Sissy. It's described as reminiscent of Mary Karr and Augustine Burroughs, who are two of the most known memoirists of the last century. It has also been described as calling to mind Harper Lee and Flannery O'Connor. So consider me sold. And there you have it. That is the other half of my LGBTQI TBR. If there's anything on here that you think I need to bump up the priority list and maybe get to faster, please let me know. If there's anything that you think I could probably skip or avoid, let me know that. And if you have other recommendations, let me know that as well. I'm going to be doing a video, hopefully tomorrow, about essential queer books, where I can talk about books that I have actually read and enjoyed and think you might enjoy. So I'll be back for that. Thank you for your time watching this video. If you enjoyed it, I hope you will subscribe. If you're already subscribed, thank you. You are the best and continue to be the best. And I'll be back for that. Until then, happy reading.